Welcome to Honeybee. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Real stories of love, lies, and betrayal, where every truth stings. Let's begin. My name is Damien. One quiet Saturday afternoon, while cleaning out our garage, I found an old iPhone buried in a shoebox, an object I hadn't seen in years. That forgotten phone, once charged, exposed the reality of my marriage through text messages my wife never expected me to read. What I discovered didn't just break our marriage. It showed me that the woman I had shared 8 years would have been living a life far different from the one I believed we had together. On the surface, our marriage had looked steady, unremarkably so, the kind of quiet rhythm long-term relationships often settle into. Veronica and I had been married 8 years, together for 10. We had fallen into routines that I once thought represented mature, lasting love rather than the fiery passion of our early days. We split bills, alternated cooking, watched TV together most nights, and ran our home like a functional team. It wasn't passion anymore, but I thought that was normal. What happens when two people grow from infatuation into building a shared life? We didn't argue much, handled money responsibly, and seemed to agree on the big picture goals. Our careers, buying a house, and the future we were shaping. But looking back now, what I thought was comfortable stability was actually emotional distance quietly growing between us. Veronica had been going out more often, staying late with friends, citing work events that, in hindsight, never quite made sense. Our physical connection had faded bit by bit, with Veronica offering believable reasons, stress, exhaustion, not being in the mood. I brushed it off as part of the natural changes marriages go through under pressure from work and life. Her job as a marketing manager had become more demanding that year, with longer hours and frequent travel. I assumed her absence and fatigue were just side effects of career growth. The discovery that destroyed my view of our marriage came during what should have been a normal weekend chore. Veronica had gone to see her parents due to her mother's worsening health, a trip that had become increasingly common. I decided it was a good time to finally tackle the garage, which had turned into a catch-all for old boxes, holiday decorations, and random things we kept saying we'd sort out someday. I worked for about an hour, organizing items into piles, when I opened a shoebox expecting to find paperwork or photos. Instead, I found an old iPhone. Veronica's previous phone that I remembered had stopped working before she replaced it. It was completely dead, but I grew curious about what memories it might hold before throwing it out. I found a compatible charger in the same box and plugged it in, figuring it would take a while to power on after so long. I went back to sorting boxes, occasionally checking on it until, about an hour later, the phone finally turned on. To my surprise, it wasn't locked with a password. I hoped to find old photos of us, maybe some messages that would remind me of when we were happy together. The gallery had plenty of older pictures from vacations and parties with friends that brought a wave of nostalgia. But then I noticed something that made my heart beat faster. The Messages app showed recent activity. Apparently, Veronica still had the same iCloud account connected. Curiosity turned to dread as I opened her messages and began scrolling. What I saw made the ground beneath me feel like it disappeared. There were months' worth of conversations between Veronica and her best friend. Conversations that revealed a version of my wife I didn't recognize. She vented constantly about our marriage, describing me not just in unkind ways, but with outright contempt. She called me boring, predictable, and sexually disappointing, even comparing me to other men she met through work. She complained about our finances, our lifestyle, nearly every part of our life together. But the worst part came as I read further. Hidden among those texts was proof of something much darker than simple unhappiness. Veronica had been having an affair with a married mutual friend, someone we socialized with regularly. The messages went back at least 6 months and contained explicit details about their sexual relationship, planning their secret meetups, and even strategies for keeping me and the man's wife from finding out. Her descriptions of their time together were full of passion, an excitement I hadn't seen from her in years, maybe ever. Reading them was like realizing I'd been living with a stranger who had played the role of my wife while living another life behind my back. The contrast between the loving, responsible partner she acted like at home and the woman in those texts was almost too much to process. I physically felt the pain, my chest tightening, my breathing shallow. I reread certain messages over and over, hoping I had misunderstood, but there was no mistake. It wasn't just the affair. It was the way she mocked me, ridiculed my attempt at romance, and admitted to her friend that she resented having to pretend to be happy with me. She had been carefully balancing two lives, with no sign of stopping, keeping our marriage for financial stability and social image while getting her excitement elsewhere. I started taking screenshots of the worst messages, partly as evidence, partly because I couldn't wrap my head around the full scope of her betrayal. For a brief moment, I thought about confronting her immediately when she got home, but instead, I decided to wait, give myself time to process, to figure out how to respond. The logical part of me already knew our marriage was over, but I needed to let the shock settle before taking action. I wanted Veronica to know her secret life was no longer hidden, that she could no longer compartmentalize her affair and our marriage. So I decided on something that would make sure she faced her own words. I printed out the most damning messages, those showing her contempt, her planning, her passion for another man, and organized them chronologically. It was painful to go through them again, but it also brought me a kind of resolve. The next morning, before Veronica came home, I taped those printed texts all over the house, on the fridge, the bathroom mirror, the TV, the bedroom door. I wanted the truth to stare her in the face the moment she walked in. When I was done, I packed a bag and left to stay with a close friend who I trusted to support me. I didn't leave a note. I wanted the silence to speak for me. Veronica's reaction came quickly. Within hours, she was calling, texting, her messages swinging from denial to panic. At first, she claimed I had misunderstood, that the messages didn't reflect how she really felt. When I stayed silent, she became more desperate, eventually admitting to the affair but downplaying it as just a mistake. By the end of the week, she was promising to cut off her friend, end the affair, go to counseling, anything to fix the marriage. But I still didn't respond. When I returned the following weekend, the house looked different. The messages I taped everywhere were gone, some ripped and crumpled. Veronica was sitting in the living room, looking exhausted, her eyes swollen from crying. As soon as she saw me, she broke down, begging me not to leave her, promising she would change. But I had already moved past that point. I calmly told her I hadn't come back to argue or negotiate. I was there to collect my belongings and move forward with ending the marriage. I explained that her text had already told me everything I needed to know, and that no amount of tears could erase months of deception. Veronica cried harder, insisting that the woman in those messages wasn't the real her, that the affair didn't reflect how she truly felt. She begged for one more chance. But the truth was, I had already seen enough. Those texts weren't random lapses in judgment. They were a window into who she really was when she thought there would be no consequences. That day, I packed the rest of my things, handed her the divorce papers my lawyer had prepared, and left. The divorce took about 6 months. Veronica occasionally sent messages during that time, expressing regret and asking to meet, but I never engaged beyond what was necessary for legal matters. We had no children and separate finances, so the process was straightforward. She got her share of the house equity and savings, but no spousal support, thanks to the evidence of her affair. Her relationship with the affair partner ended soon after I filed, once the thrill and secrecy were gone. Even after the divorce, Veronica tried to maintain contact, suggesting we could still be friends. But I refused. Staying in touch would have been another form of control, something she no longer had the right to. Finding that iPhone turned out to be a blessing. It showed me the truth I needed to see, that I deserved better than living with someone who had already chosen deceit over honesty. Veronica expected me to fight for her. Instead, I simply walked away, because once I'd seen who she really was, I couldn't unsee it. Sometimes the end doesn't come in a dramatic fight, but in the quiet realization that you deserve more than what someone is willing to give. Thank you for watching.